Uh-oh, J.E. and Van Paul are finna fight. Oh, that one hurt, Van Paul. That one hurt. Other announcement. This is real important, seniors. We are changing the date on the fellowship from Wednesday to Thursday. Okay, there's inclement weather that is looking pretty severe coming in on Wednesday, and so we're going to switch that to Thursday. It'll be the same time, but they'll be doing that on Thursday. Okay, so everybody, tell me what I just said. All right, I will not be blamed for y'all not getting the memo. Okay. All right. Any other announcements we need to make mention of? I do want to just let you know that we have about 6 people that are confirmed. If everybody gets their passports on time, they will be confirmed to go with us to El Salvador. I'm helping one of our BMA ministers, Hispanic guy up in Jonesboro, trying to help him raise some money so he can go with us. He's bilingual and he really wants to go on a mission trip. And we are planning on doing some light construction work, and we're planning on doing a basketball clinic and sharing the gospel in the midst of the basketball clinic. And then I'll be doing a leadership conference during that week too. So we're going to be going the 23rd to the 28th. And so begin praying for us now. Pray for our safety. Pray for prices. You know, we won't be able to get the plane tickets until all of our passports get in and we get the numbers on the passports. And I'm just praying that the hike and the diesel and the fuel doesn't really alter our airplane tickets, but we're in pretty good shape right now. And so I appreciate all that the church has done for us in raising funds to help us to go. We're going to be looking for some Brother Allen is looking for some basketballs he's got a connection with, and I'm not sure how much they're going to cost, but just let me know. We'll take them over there deflated and then inflate them and be able to leave all the kids with the basketball. And one other thing that you might look for, and I don't know where they sell these, we may have to go to Oriental Trading, but for the little kids, I'm wanting to take a bunch of glow sticks. Those are a big hit with the little kids, and so if you come across some glow sticks, you know, the kind you just break and they glow. I took these to Bolivia. All right, and we went to Bolivia. We were in the jungle. We were on the river boat on the MS Arrington, and so there's no civilization. I mean, there's no roads. There's no electricity. They have solar powered. That's how we got our lights for teaching at night. And Jennifer packed my suitcase full of these glow sticks, and I thought, this is the most ridiculous thing, but she did it anyway. I get down there and I hand these out to the kids, and the next day all the women had stolen them from the kids, and they were wearing them, you know, and they were wearing them even after they weren't glowing. And so so just remember glow sticks. If you come across some glow sticks, we're going to try to take some for the little kids that, you know, maybe can't participate in the basketball clinic or what have you, but really looking forward to that. Rigo's looking forward to that, and I wish some of y'all could have seen what he was meeting in before they got the construction project done, because God has really blessed them. And we will be doing this, by the way, we'll be doing this not at his church. We may do some at his church, but they've just started a new mission. As that one that I was telling you, they were having nursery in the back of a pickup truck. And so we're going to be helping them with the new mission. They've already got about 40 kids that they've gathered and are ministering to. And so I really think it's going to be a good opportunity for us to minister to them. So be in prayer for that. Well, let's go, Lord, in prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Brother Chris. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for allowing us to come back tonight. And, Lord, I just thank you for the privilege of being able to worship with brothers and sisters in Christ. And, Lord, to be a part of your family is such a privilege. And, Father, we just pray for those who are still in bereavement. We pray for those who are going through hard times. And, God, we just ask that you would lift their burdens, that you would carry them. And, Father, I pray for Chris tonight as he speaks. I pray that you give him free recall of his things that he has studied, the things that he has prepared for. And Father, we just pray that you'd be glorified tonight, that you'd be honored by everything we do. And we pray it in Christ's name. Amen.
Well, it's obvious that, am I on? That I'm not on. You hear me now? All right. It's obvious God does work in miracles, because some of y'all were here a couple of weeks ago and listened to me, and you actually came back for more. So I think that's sign in itself. But tonight we're following up with we started off with the Big Bang Theory, and we're gonna go into evolution, and we're gonna look at some of the contrast between the different arguments. You know me, I've got some audio visual. I really like the audio visual thing, so I'm gonna play a few videos. But the Big Bang Theory, you know, the more I started looking into this, and I was telling Brother Gary about this earlier, the Big Bang Theory was kind of hard to put information together to stand up here and give you a speech on it, because there's no concrete evidence. You've got nothing. All you've got is these people that's running numbers and going, oh, look, here's what I came up with. And the other side's going, oh, I came up with this. But evolution has so much out there. And this one, I really got excited about this, but this one, the more I looked into it, the more I found. So I've got about a 3-hour presentation for you tonight. No, I could literally stand up here for 3 hours and give information, but you know, we don't have that amount of time, so I've kind of chopped it up a little bit. So as you're listening to me up here, you're gonna think, oh, he kind of jumped a little bit. Why didn't he keep going? Because I couldn't get everything in. There's a few main points I wanted to get to. There's a few points that I'm going to get nervous up here and I'm going to skip over, but I'm trying to hit some of the highlighted points and some of what I found that was the most interesting to me, and it was the easiest for me to explain to you the way it was supposed to have been explained. So we all know who started evolution. Let me make sure this thing is working before I go too far. That's what I thought. There we go. All right. So Charles Darwin was the creator of evolution, if you will. But what do we really know about Charles Darwin? All we know is his theory of evolution. We don't really know who he was. We don't know what his motivation was for coming up with this theory. But basically, all right, so to really begin, we got to understand what evolution is. And I'm not going to stand up here and give a bunch of definitions, and I'm just kind of briefly explain it to you. So evolution is the process of natural selection through a period of time. What is natural selection? I'm just going to explain it to you without going over the definition. This is the actual definition of it, but natural selection is a process where different traits go away and the superior traits kind of take over. So as a creature or an animal or whatever, if their surviving trait lasts on, they change from generation to generation. So a couple of examples would be giraffes. So evolutionists say that giraffes started looking like cows, and then they started getting longer and longer necks so they could survive eating off of the trees. And then the giraffes with the shorter necks, they just kind of died and went away. Now we have giraffes with longer necks. Another example would be little mice. So you got black mice, brown mice, white mice, and they're all running around in the field. And the hawk comes down, and he can easily spot the white mice in the green and the brown. So he swoops down and he gets the white mice, and what's left is the brown mice reproducing to have brown and black mice. So they're a little more camouflaged. Another example, I didn't actually draw this, but another example would be a big fish eating a smaller fish, and then a bigger fish eating the big fish. So now you have the bigger of the species surviving because it's eating all the other smaller. Now, the question I have is, if giraffes have to have long necks to survive, how did the young survive? How did they get past the point of, we all know that at some point the mother's going to wean the child. So how does he get from that point to a long-necked giraffe and full grown? And who's to say that all trees are tall? I mean, last time I mowed my yard, I was getting slapped in the face by limbs and trees, and I was sitting on a lawnmower. I didn't have this big old long neck. And if the bigger species is one to survive, what happened to this guy? This is a prehistoric shark, and he's a pretty good sized fella. So Charles Darwin, here's kind of where Charles started. In 1831, Charles boarded a ship, and he went on a 5-year voyage. And they came across these islands that were kind of secluded from everything. And there was kind of like Hawaii, had a bunch of little bitty islands off of the main island. And all of these birds, they were finches that had different beak sizes. And he's looking at this, and he's thinking, now there's something to this. This is what he thought was his concrete evidence for evolution. He thought that these birds were evolving through time through their need to feed themselves. That was the key point in his theory of evolution. The problem with that is that he only studied these birds for a short period of time. We now know that through decades of going back and looking at these finches, that during dry periods or wet periods due to rainfall, these finches change through time. Their beaks may get longer, may get shorter, but in the end, they're still finches. They didn't change into a lizard. They still fly around. They didn't evolve into anything. They just changed. We're going to skip past this one. All right, so who was Charles Darwin? Charles Darwin started off as a Christian. And somewhere through his years, he became more of an agnostic. He didn't believe in God or he didn't disbelieve in God. He was kind of right down the middle. Charles Darwin lost his Christian perspective somewhere. I don't know if he got mad at God. I don't know if he got mad at society or whatever, but he lost his perspective. And he ended his years still as an agnostic. But he still saw issues with his own theory, and we're going to go over some of that a little bit later. One of Charles Darwin's arguments, I don't know if y'all can read this or not, but I'll kind of briefly, that the population of species, including humans, grew faster than the food supply, leading to competition for scarce resources, which the fit were able to get and survive. Now, he believed that all species had a superior race, including mankind. Charles Darwin believed that the Europeans were superior to Africans, Indians, and all other races. And he believed that that's why the Europeans were justified in annihilating all other races, because they were the superior race. Now, you can find this. It's hard to find, but you can find it. We learned about this in our class one Sunday morning, and I went back to look for it, and it was hard for me to find it, but the information is out there. So there are some that believe that the Nazis actually got their idea of a supreme race from Darwin's theory. I personally don't believe that Charles Darwin started off with his theory of evolution to get us to a point to where we are today. Today, the science believes that all life came from one single cell organism and evolved into where we are today. I don't think Charles actually started there. I think other people had some input, and it just eventually grew into where we are today. I think his main point when he started off was just species were changing. And I think we agree today there are changing of species. Look at dogs. Look at deer. There's a lot of different species of deer. There's a lot of different species of dogs, but there's still, types of dogs and types of deer, but they're all still dogs and deer. Now, I can't argue against whether evolution is correct in a slight change in the characteristics of animals, but I don't think any of us believe that a dog turns into a cat or a dog evolved into a cow. So let's not focus too much on where Darwin was, because it goes greater than just Darwin's theory. We want to look into how we got from a single-cell organism all the way up to humans. All right, so the theory is that one single-cell organism evolved into a multi-cell organism, and it evolved into a fish, and then it evolved into a lizard, and then it evolved into a monkey, and then it evolved into us. However, that theory, we learned, one of the things that we talked about in the Big Bang versus God's creation was the process of science. So you have a hypothesis, and then you've got a theory, and then that theory can either be proven or disproven, and it becomes law. So we have a scientific law, the law of biogenesis. The law of biogenesis basically says no living cell can come from non-living. It only comes from another living cell. So science says that through time, when the earth was formed, there was proteins and amino acids and all these things that was floating around in this soupy mush, and somehow they all lined up to form a single-cell organism. But that goes directly against scientific law. So it can't happen. They've proven over and over again, and I think I'm fixing to jump topics here. They've proven over and over again since 1859, 160 years. They've gone 160 years proving that life comes from living and not from non-living. So when science first started theorizing over the cells, this is the microscope they were using. It looks, for today's standards, it looks kind of like a child's toy, and it's something you could probably buy at Walmart. This is probably the image that they were getting on a cell. Now, this is more than one cell. This is a group of cells. This is as close as they could get. Today, we have electron microscopes. There's a huge difference in the technology that we have. This is what they first saw when they were able to zoom in to a single cell. And you see that there's a lot of workings going on in there. Then they went, this is more than just one blob of whatever, living tissue. There's more going on in there. So in order to kind of, now I don't want to bore us too much on biology, but I've got a video to explain the workings of a cell, and it's very important while we know this. We're going to go ahead and play that now.
Cells are the smallest living units of an organism. All cells have three things in common, no matter what type of cell they are. All cells have a cell membrane, which separates the inside of the cell from its environment, cytoplasm, which is a jelly-like fluid, and DNA, which is the cell's genetic material. So, what are organelles? Organelle means little organ. Organelles are the specialized parts of a cell that have unique jobs to perform. Let's start with the nucleus, the control center of the cell. The nucleus contains DNA, or genetic material. DNA dictates what the cell is going to do and how it's going to do it. Chromatin is the tangled, spread-out form of DNA found inside the nuclear membrane. When a cell is ready to divide, DNA condenses into structures known as chromosomes. The nucleus also contains a nucleolus, which is a structure where ribosomes are made. After ribosomes leave the nucleus, they will have the important job of synthesizing or making proteins. Outside the nucleus, the ribosomes and the rest of the organelles float around in cytoplasm, which is the jelly-like substance. Ribosomes may wander freely within the cytoplasm or attach to the endoplasmic reticulum, sometimes abbreviated as ER. There are two types of ER. Rough ER has ribosomes attached to it, and smooth ER doesn't have ribosomes attached to it. The endoplasmic reticulum is a membrane-enclosed passageway for transporting materials, such as the proteins synthesized by ribosomes. Proteins and other materials emerge from the endoplasmic reticulum in small vesicles, where the Golgi apparatus, sometimes called the Golgi body, receives them. As proteins move through the Golgi body, they're customized into forms that the cell can use. The Golgi body does this by folding the proteins into usable shapes, or adding other materials onto them, such as lipids or carbohydrates. You will see an organelle called a lysosome. Lysosomes are the garbage collectors that take in damaged or worn-out cell parts. They are filled with enzymes that break down this cellular debris. The mitochondrion is an organelle that is the powerhouse for both animal and plant cells. During a process called cellular respiration, the mitochondria make ATP molecules that provide the energy for all of the cell's activities. Cells that need more energy have more mitochondria. Meanwhile, the cell maintains its shape through a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton includes the thread-like microfilaments, which are made of protein, and microtubules, which are thin, hollow tubes.
There's a lot going on inside of a single cell. There's a lot going on. Now, the reason we watch this video, there's a couple reasons. Later on, we're gonna learn something else about the mitochondria. Now, what evolutionists say is that we came from a single cell organism that was created in a hot, soupy mush. That these little proteins and all got together and they formed this single cell. Is there any part of that that can be broken down and removed and still have a functioning cell? I think anybody here can say no. And that goes directly against what they're saying. In order for all of these mechanisms to line up to form a single cell, you could literally have 1,000 dice and roll all sixes before that could happen. It'll never happen. So the problem with their theory of evolution is that their theory didn't evolve with our technology and our information. So back when they theorized that all living cells came from one cell or came from a single cell organism, we saw the picture that they saw. It wasn't much to it. But now we know all this. They haven't changed their theory. Their theory still is that we came from one single cell organism. So, like I said before, since 1859, we've known that living cells can only come from living cells, and we've known this for 160 years. And the evolutionists will not go back against, because if they can prove that we came from a living cell, a single cell, then that's the coup de grace of proof of God or not. So if man just suddenly appeared, then Genesis is historically accurate. But if man came from a soupy mush, then Genesis can't be accurate. If we came from a single cell and we stepped up and we upgraded and upgraded and upgraded till we are today, then the Bible is not true. And that is their main purpose. Their main purpose in their argument is to prove that we are not here due to a simple miracle. Charles Darwin himself admitted there were some things that worked against his own theory. One was the amount of archaeological finds, the remains of dinosaurs, the remains of humankind. He said there wasn't enough proof out there. There wasn't enough finding out there. But in time, archaeologists would find the proof and form all the links and put all the links together. So far, that hasn't happened. The other thing that he had an issue with was the evolution of the eye. He was stumped. Now, there's I don't know if you want to call him a scientist or whatever, but there's a well-known writer and lecturer named Richard Dawkins, and he's well known for his theory in the evolution of the eye. And I've got a video. This video was done, and you can tell this video was done a long time ago, but he's explaining his theory on how the eye evolved, which is what Darwin said. I can't explain it. It's unexplainable. I've chopped it up a little bit because it's too long, but one of the things that I want to add in there that I didn't put in there was in the video, he's talking to parents and kids. So it's kind of dumbed down a little bit, but he talks about Mount Improbable. And Mount Improbable, he's got this little small scale mountain, and he talks about how evolution is like climbing this mountain, and there's different ridges and different levels, and he says that evolution could have gone this way and come over here, and evolution could have gone this way and come over here. So when you hear him talking about Mount Probability, that's what he's talking about. But I want to play his video and then stop it and kind of walk through it a little bit at a time.
First, the eye. Charles Darwin himself said, "To this day, the eye makes me shudder." Creationists are particularly fond of the eye because they like saying, what is the use of half an eye? An eye only works, they say, if every little detail is in place. Until you've got that, the eye won't see anything at all, so how could it possibly have evolved? And even serious scientists have sometimes queried whether there's been enough time for the evolution of the eye.
All right, so he believes that an eye can slowly form and still function. Now, I should have put a slide up here on the inner workings of an eye, but there's as much inner workings on an eye as there is in a single cell.
Well, suppose we start with an ancestor who didn't really have an eye at all, but just a single, simple sheet of light-sensitive cells. That's represented by this screen here, and there's a television camera behind looking at the screen so that we on the screen, on the television screen, shall see what this primitive animal would see. So this animal, with hardly any eye at all, will at least be able to tell the difference between light and dark. Light and dark.
Okay. He started his theory off with a creature having a light-sensitive membrane. Well, he just started. He just suddenly, there's a membrane. No eye, just a membrane that senses light. So he's already jumped through a huge hurdle in evolution just to start his theory on how the eye starts. Now, one more thing before we go to the next part. He says that this membrane can sense light and darkness without an eye. So I'm wondering, how much research did he go into to find out whether there's a light-sensitive membrane that can see light and darkness without an eye? I think there's a lot of blind people out there that he could have tested, and they would have gone against his theory of whether or not you can actually see without an eye.
Now, the next stage in evolution would be to have a shallow cup. this animal would be able to tell the direction that light is coming from, because a shadow would appear. A shadow would appear there. And if you can tell the direction a light is coming from, then you can tell the direction that a predator is coming from. Now, although we've represented this as a cup coming out from the wall, it would in fact probably be an indentation, and it would be a gradual indentation. It's inconvenient to make a gradual indentation. It has to be made as a rather abrupt cup that comes out 6 inches at a time. But it's easy to see that that shadow effect that we've just been witnessing would work progressively and gradually as the cup gets bigger. Let's make it bigger still now, Bryson. And this cup is even more effective. And if we go on to the next stage where we make the cup gradually bigger again, so big that it becomes just a little hole in the end. Right, now, this animal has a very good idea of exactly where the light is, and by the same token, exactly where, for example, a predator is. And I think with this eye we might even get a little image. See if we can get an image of Bryson's hand. That smudge there is Bryson's hand, and you can just about see a very dim image of his fingers. So an animal with an eye like this would be able to see perhaps just a little bit what kind of predator it was.
He's talking to kids. All right, there's a couple things. I'll watch this part, and I kind of got frustrated. Number one, he's assuming that predators are running around with flashlights so they can see which side it's coming from. That's the first thing I took. The second thing I took is right here in the end. He's telling these kids that this light-sensitive material all of a sudden turned into an image-sensing material. Where did that come from? Other than the fact that he's got a camera sitting back behind there, you can see the image through a camera. But he still has not explained the evolution of the eye. He's explained a cup coming out and protruding from the forehead. But he does not explain how an eye can be gradually shaped around until it closes off. Now, I get it. Something could probably shape around and close off. But what about the inner workings of the eye? He's not explained anything in this video, and he's talking to a bunch of impressionable kids who look at it and go, wow, that's pretty awesome. Now, I cut that part out because there's a part of this where he calls a little kid up, and he has this kid sitting in front and go, oh, look, you can see your face in the back. And all the other kids are going, oh, yeah. But he's not teaching anything.
But has there been enough time for the evolution of the eye? Well, recently a Swedish scientist called Dan Nilsson has tried to answer that question. He did pretty much the same as we've just been doing here, but he did it with a computer. So instead of growing up in big steps, as we had to do with our wooden model, he was able to do it in very small steps on his computer. In fact, very small steps indeed, deliberately. He assumed that each step, which means each mutation, caused only a 1% change in the size of something, like, say, the steepness of a cup. He also devised a way of measuring the efficiency of an eye. He did this by telling the computer to measure various things about the eye that it had just drawn itself. And then the computer worked out, using the rules of physics, how good an image that eye would be capable of producing. And the question was, with those rules built into it, would there be a smooth gradient of improvement, starting out with a flat retina and ending with a proper eye like ours? And you've guessed it, the answer is yes. This was Nielsen's starting point, with just a flat retina under a flat transparent layer. And now let's just run the simulation of, these are the successive stages that Nielsen got, and they're pretty similar to the successive stages that Bryson got with his model. So far we haven't learned anything that we didn't already know. There is a smooth progression, up Mount Improbable, for the eye. But Nielsen went on to estimate how many generations it would take to accomplish this evolution. In order to do this, he had to make some more detailed assumptions. I won't bother you with exactly what they were, All you need know is that they were quantities which geneticists out in the field can measure and have measured. And Nielsen put into his computer model values of these quantities that were conservative. Conservative means that he was erring on the side of deliberately biasing his calculation to make it slow, to give it an estimate on the slow side of evolution. Make evolution come out slower than it might otherwise have done. But in spite of this, in spite of his being conservative, and in spite of assuming that each mutation could only cause a 1% change, which is another conservative assumption, Nielsen found that the evolution of the eye, we've just seen, would take a surprisingly short time. It would take about 250,000 generations. Well, that might sound like quite a lot of generations, but we have a rather warped perspective, because after all, each one of us is only good for one generation. But our human perspective is not the one that matters. The one that matters is the geological timescale. And on the geological timescale, 250,000 generations is next to nothing. Probably only about 250,000 years, since the animals we're talking about will probably have had a generation time of about a year. And 250,000 years is really too short for geologists to even measure. It's like trying to count seconds using the hour hand of your watch. So there really was no need for Darwin to shudder. Half an eye is better than no eye. Half an eye is better than 49% of an eye. 1% of an eye is better than no eye at all. And far from there not being enough time for the evolution of the eye, the evolution of the eye is so quick and easy that it must have happened many, many times over. Eyes can evolve at the drop of a hat. And in fact, if we look around the animal kingdom, there are lots of different kinds of eyes dotted around, and each of them is different. Many of them work on completely different principles, and they have evolved quite independently of each other.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. They've got a computer model that shows that the formation of an eye can happen over 250,000 generations. Anybody know anything about computers? You have to tell the computer what to do, which is exactly what he said that the scientist did. He told the computer, here's what I want you to do, and he ran a program, and look at there, the eye formed through his own information. And once again, they started with an assumption that this creature that started an eye had the light-sensitive membrane before the eye ever started evolving. Now, there's a couple other things. I went back and I started really thinking about this. So, in the beginning, you've got this prey with this light-sensitive membrane that's over him, and this predator coming around with a flashlight looking for him. That means that there's two species out there. You got the predator and the prey. It wasn't just one. So two species. It was multiple species in his hypothetical world. That means that the eye had to evolve spontaneously in the same way thousands of times. What are the odds of that? I don't see that happening. So at the drop of a hat, he said that eyes, they evolved at the drop of a hat. So I'm wondering if anybody has seen an eye form on a species that we have today. I mean, we've got some pretty good geological records of different animals going back thousands of years, and I've yet to see one where you got, and I'm going to use this as an example, you've got a human skull with two eyes in the front, and then 1,000 years later, you got a human skull with two eyes in the front. 1,000 years later, you got two in the front and one in the back. Haven't seen that yet. So at the drop of a hat, even if it's a 1% change, over all the years that we know what humans have looked like, we've not seen the change of the eye over thousands of generations. So he said. He also said. Let me go forward. We got one more, and we're going to be done with this video.
Once again, remember that each step is a small piece of random luck, As such, each step is not particularly impressive. In fact, it had better not be impressive, because if it was, it would be a miracle, and we'd no longer have a true explanation. The whole point of evolution is that it gets us up Mount Improbable without miracles.
That is their number one argument. That is the number one goal in evolutionists, is they're trying to come up with any way to prove that mankind was not created through an act of a miracle. And they all say that. They all end their argument the same way. He said that each step was random luck. Now, I go back to what I said before. If it's random luck, how did thousands of species have random luck to develop the eye? And Charles Darwin knew this. Charles Darwin knew that was the biggest opponent of his theory. But this guy has come up with this. Well, anyway, I got kind of frustrated when I was watching this guy, because I knew that everything he was saying was hypothetical, and everything that he was saying, he was throwing a lot of assumptions into his models. But in closing, he talked about going up Mount Impossible. So the problem with the eye evolving over different, in his own argument, because I didn't put it in there, but he shows this shell going up the mountain this way and getting on a plateau, and he goes, oh look, he can't evolve anymore because he's kind of stuck over here, and this one goes over here and he's stuck over here. Well, if you're going up Mount Impossible in different ways, and you're getting stuck on different levels, like he's teaching these kids, the eye should not have evolved the same way with all these different species out there. Let's move on, and we're going to get to the theory of man coming from chimp. So, evolutionists believe that through time, man evolved from apes. They've said this for decades, that the DNA of a chimp is somewhere at 97 to 98% similar to humans. Now, they've done a little bit more research, and they've gone back and they figured out that in order to get that accuracy, they hand chose which parts of the DNA that they tested. And what they found, there was 100,000 DNA letters left out in their test. So when you add these DNA markers back into it, instead of having a 97, 98% similarity, you drop down to 80%. Now, if you back up and you use that same test on, I don't know, let's say a dolphin, you get 98% similar to a human. If you use that same test on a pig, 98.5% similar to a human. So the question is, did we come from monkeys, or did we come from pigs, or did we come from a dolphin? Because by their own test, we're 98% similar to each one of these species. So the question is that if man came from monkey, and the same question comes from believers or creationists like us, as there are some non-believers that they're non-believers in evolution. They may not be Christians, they may not even believe in God, but they don't believe that man came from monkey. But the same question comes about from everybody. If man came from monkey, where did monkey come from? Why are there still monkeys out there? So the answer to that, and what the evolutionists say, is that there was a creature that started the evolutionary tree. And I know this slide is hard to see, but you go up the tree and you branch off this way and you have a different species, and you branch off this way and you have another species. And somewhere in there we go from this single creature to either apes or monkeys or orangutans or human. And it has nothing to do with one species being eliminated over the other one, but that goes back to what the theory of evolution is. If the theory of evolution is that we came from an inferior creature, this inferior creature should no longer be here. It should have died out. So this is one of the questions that some of the atheists or evolutionists say. Well, because we always say if we came from monkey, why is monkey still here? They go, well, if man came from dirt, why is there still dirt? I think that's absurd, but I thought it was kind of a funny question. So looking at these pictures, what do you see in common with all these? You have all these different types of gorillas and orangutans. What do you see in common with them? Well, yeah, and there's some of us that kind of, ugly too, but they all very good. They all have fur. They all have fur. They all have fur to protect themselves from the environment. So, if the theory of evolution is correct, and we're coming from a species that evolved into something better to survive, did evolution really think and stop and go, I think I'm gonna make this man over here with no fur because he can make his own clothes? That's not even logical. And look at this. You drop these two out in the wild, which one do you think is going to survive in a fight for food? The gorilla's going to win every time, right? So if you take man and you take any type of monkey or gorilla or whatever, and you drop them out in the wild, the monkey's going to win every time. They are superior to the human race, other than intelligence. And in my opinion, evolution doesn't care whether you have a photographic memory or you have an IQ of 160 or above, because IQ and memory retainage has nothing to do with your ability to survive in the wild. And if you've ever seen, Naked and Afraid, that's proof man does not belong in the wild. All right, so this is Lucy. Lucy was found over in Africa and is believed to be our first female bipedal human. And scientists were just ecstatic because they found the missing link between man and ape, or man and monkey, or so they believed. So she was found in the early 70s, and she stood only about 3.5 feet tall. But when they found her, they had dozens and dozens of workers out there, over 50 square meters. Now, I don't know if you guys know what 50 square meters are, but it was probably from here to the back wall and from the center of the aisle over to the wall. They dug tons and tons of dirt out to find this. That is what they found to come up with this image. Now, I'll let you look at this one more time. Pay attention to the skull. There's not a lot there. But they used these bones to determine that this was a bipedal humanoid. So a few years after Lucy was found, they found footprints. They found footprints in wet ash. And these footprints were dated to be, let me back up. Lucy was dated to be 3.2 million years old. These footprints were dated to be 3.5 million years old. Now, for those of y'all that were here in my first speech, we talked about the problems with dating rocks. There's a big flaw. If you remember Mount St. Helens, they dated the rocks or the lava that came from Mount St. Helens to be 2 million years old, and it was actually 10 years old. So there's a huge problem with their dating process. But anyway, this was dated to be 3.5 billion years old. And it's a humanoid foot. But Lucy was supposed to be the first human, and she's 3.2 million years old. Or 3.2, that was the oldest range that she could have been. So do you think they went, we're wrong? Nope. They said, we misdated. Lucy is actually older, and she made those prints. Well, those prints were found 4,300 miles from where Lucy was found. 4,300 miles. That is a long walk. That's walking from the East Coast to the West Coast and halfway back. I don't think there's anybody would ever walk that far. I don't care how hungry you got. You're not going to walk that far. If you're living in an area where you got food and shelter, you've already created all that, you're not going to walk around that far. So their timeline on that is definitely wrong. So I'm going to jump ahead here because we're getting short on time. All right, so creationists have done some studies on their own. And what they did, they used DNA. They were doing some DNA studies. And what they found was in today's time, you can keep track of generations. So through generations of people of the same family, they did DNA tests. And what they found was there was mutation rates in the DNA. And since they had multiple generations that they were testing, they found a consistent pattern in the mutation rate. So using that consistent pattern, they went backwards. Now let me back up and say this. When a evolutionist starts trying to date something, they're already starting back here, way millions and millions of years. And there's all these pieces and information that they're trying to fit this new piece of the puzzle. They're trying to fit it in to where it dates all the way back. So they've got an assumption that it was back here. So now they use their test to come up with this answer that fits, that it goes back here. One of the things that creationist science does is they let the information speak for itself. So they did this DNA testing, and they found the mutation rate, and they started working the rate backwards through generations. And what they found was through the mutation rate, they come all the way back to 6,000 years. They let the math speak for itself. So they went one step further. In 1987, they did some testing, and they tested DNA from several different countries and different ethnic backgrounds, and they were looking to see, is there similarity? What they found was every living human had the same mitochondrial DNA. They came from the same mother. That was proven back in 1987. So the evolutionists going, that's what we told you. We got Lucy. We told you she was the first one. That's what they're believing. Well, the problem with that is, if Lucy was the first one, then where did the male come from? Where's that at? Well, in 1997, they started running the test again. Now, we've gotten a little bit better with our DNA testing through technology. So in 1997, they started rerunning the test again. And what they found was that we all came from the same male parent. And they can date this all the way back. And they can also take it back and tell you what area that we came from. And when we did come out of Africa. So evolutionists saw this a little different than what we did. With the new information, they said it fit their model that Lucy was the first female. But there's a problem. There was no male. So how did Lucy evolve, the first female, and then you had the first male evolve at the exact same time? If it's just random chance that there's this big change in the DNA, how did that happen twice at the exact same time? They can't explain that. All right, so this is the difference. I'm sorry, I should have played this. The bottom red circle is where Lucy was found, and the top red circle is where the footprints were found. So can you imagine walking all the way around like that? All right, does anybody recognize this? Dragonfly. We all knew exactly what it was. Well, other than the fact that this dragonfly has a wingspan of a little over 2 feet, they look exactly the same. Well, this dragonfly is supposedly 285 million years old. But it's exactly the same as what we have today. So if evolution is true, then how do you have something that you've dated 250 million years that looks exactly like we have today? I mean, we have people that stand 8, 9 feet tall. We have people that stand 3 feet tall. Is it not? and they're all great people. All right, so we have an issue with things changing over timelines. All right, so here is the skeletal changes through evolution. This is something that evolution has put together. I don't know if you guys can see that because I can barely see it from where I'm at, and I promise you it looked a whole lot better on the computer. But anyway, Courtney, can you tell me on the first one at the top, your left, what is the age range on that? All right, MYA. MYA stands for million years of age. All right, so we're going to fast forward, go all the way down, all the way down. Man, I'm telling you, this slide was great when you could read it. Basically, what this is, down at the bottom, you get to 1.2 million years ago to 800,000. The K is 1,000, 800,000 years ago. Then you go 700,000 years ago to 200,000 years ago. There was another change. And then you get to 300,000 years ago to 45,000 years ago. There's another change. And then you get to 130,000 years ago to today, and there's another change. Now, I'm a numbers guy. Do y'all see anything wrong with this thing? Do you see? If you use their own math, we're 65,000 years past another evolutionary change. Look at the rate of change and how it changes. It's almost like a half-life. So a half-life from the first, there was another one, and the half-life from that one is another one, and the half-life of that one is another one. We should have already evolved one more time 65,000 years ago by their own time frame. All right, I'm going to stop with this because we're almost at an hour. I want to leave you with one more bit of information. For 2,000 years, we have seen this symbol as a symbol of our salvation. And we all know the story. We've all been here. But in 1997, science found proof that the cross is not only a symbol of our salvation, it is a literal saver of our lives. This is laminin. And I don't know if any of you all know what laminin is. Laminin, laminin. I'm going to cut it short to what laminin does because there's laminin holds the protein together in our bodies. Every living creature has a cross-shaped laminin in their body, which holds them together. That's all I've got tonight. I appreciate you guys coming out.
Yeah, what he didn't tell you, I was hoping he'd tell you, was that they just got back from the Creation Museum and Noah's Ark this week.
Talk about
you
that
could
one.
have talked about that, huh? But also, the video he showed of Richard Dawkins, if you read his last book one of the last books that he wrote was called The God Delusion. From the very beginning, his goal was to discredit God. And so he didn't stop that until it got too late for him. So thank you, Chris. Sure appreciate that. Anybody have a scientific question for Chris? That's right. That's right. And we studied in our lenient class tonight, we studied that God created us in his image so that we could bear his image to the world. And that's our job, is to bear the image of Christ to a lost and dying world. Let's stand, and we'll be dismissed. I'm going to ask Frank, if he will, say a word of prayer. Chris, would you stand at the back and let everybody say, oh me, or thank you, or whatever they want to, whatever